Hello everyone, and this is Glenda Winkleman. Welcome back to Creative Grandma. Today's episode for Stitch of the Week is called the Crossed Tunisian Stitch. This is a really simple stitch to do. I have my 3 samples showing. I have the multicolored rainbow where I change colors in every row. And on this one, you can see the detail of the crossed stitches. So that's the rainbow. I also done my classic white. And then I did one with the yarn changing colors, a color changing yarn. Very, very pretty. Just a delicate, nicely little textured stitch. So for today's sample swatch, if you're going to follow along, I do have the pattern at the end of the video where you can go copy, paste, or just give me a quick email and I'll send it to you if you want to follow along. This is just a 1-row repeat. So to start this sample swatch, I'm going to use Red Heart Super Saver in the color Turquoise. I'm also have my Afghan hook size L11 or 8mm. Or again, you can use the 10.5K or the 6.5 millimeter. We're going to do a sample swatch with a chain of 20. So go ahead and get your chain 20 ready, and I'll be right back to begin our swatch. I have my chain 20 ready. So now we're going to begin with the first basic row, which is a regular Afghan stitch row. The second row will be our repeat row, and that's the row that you'll repeat the pattern. So to begin this stitch, you're going to skip this first chain and insert your hook into the next chain. Yarn over the hook and pull it through the chain. Insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over and pull it through the chain. What you're doing with your first row is you're putting all your stitches on, you're leaving them on your hook, and then the second half of the row is when you'll remove all your loops on the hook. So insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over the hook, pull it through the chain. Insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over the hook, pull it through the chain. There we have 2, 4, 5 loops on the hook. You'll continue across your chain to the very last chain, and you should have 20 loops on your hook, and I'll meet you at the end of the row. I completed my first half of row 1. We started with 20 chains, and you should have 20 loops on your hook. So there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Now if you don't have 20 loops on your hook, then double check your work and start over. It's always better to start over and learn it right than to just say I'll fix it in the next row. So to take your loops off the hook, you're going to put your yarn over the end of over the hook and pull just through 1 loop only. Now you're going to put your yarn over the hook and you're going to pull through 2 loops on your hook. Put the yarn over your hook, pull through 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over the hook, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over the hook, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over the hook, pull through 2 loops. And you'll continue over until the end of the row, and you should have 1 loop remaining on your hook. So go ahead and finish taking off your loops, and I'll meet you at the end of row 1. I'm at the end of row 1, and this is what your piece should look like. You should have 1 loop remaining on your hook, and this counts as the first stitch of the next row. So now we're going to start row 2, which is our repeat row. You skip this first vertical stitch here because your loop on your hook is your first stitch. You're going to skip the next vertical stitch, you're going to insert your hook into the next vertical stitch. Yarn over the hook, pull it through that stitch. You're going to come back to the right and you're going to work in this vertical stitch that you skipped. So bring your hook back, put it underneath that vertical stitch that you skipped, yarn over the hook, and pull it through that one stitch. And if you look, that's what creates your crossed Tunisian stitch. So you're going to skip the next vertical stitch, you're going to insert your hook into the next vertical stitch, yarn over the hook, pull it through that vertical stitch. You're going to come back to the right, you're going to insert your hook into that skipped vertical stitch, yarn over the hook, pull it through that stitch. Now you can see you created 2 Tunisian cross stitches. So you're going to repeat that across your row. Let's do it one more time. You're going to skip the next vertical stitch. You're going to insert your hook into the next vertical stitch just under the one strand of yarn only. Yarn over your hook, pull it through that stitch. You're going to come back to the right and look for your vertical stitch that you skipped. Bring your hook back, insert it under that one strand only, yarn over the hook, and pull it through that one strand only. And there you created another crossed Tunisian stitch. So go ahead and work that across to the end of the row, and you will end with just one strand here. So work up until the last strand, and I'll meet you here to show you how to do the last stitch. I'm at the end of the first half of row 2, and if you worked across to the very last stitch but didn't work it, you should have 19 loops on your hook. So I'm going to go ahead, and for the last stitch we're going under one strand only for this pattern. You're just going to go under that one strand in the last one. Now if you go under 2, what's going to happen is this side's going to pull down and your work's going to be uneven. It's going to pull on the left side of the work. So just go under the one strand only, and that gives it the extra give it needs to keep your work even. So yarn over the hook and pull it through one strand, that very last strand. You should have 20 loops on your hook. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. And this is what your piece should look like. So now we're going to take them off. Now to take your loops off, it's going to be in the same manner with each row. Yarn over your hook, through that first stitch, yarn over the hook, through 2 loops on your hook, yarn over the hook, through 2 loops, yarn over the hook, through 2 loops on your hook. So go ahead and take your loops off, and you should have 1 loop remaining on your hook that counts as the first stitch of the next row. I'll meet you at the end of row 2. I'm at the end of row 2, and this is what your piece should look like. You can see your cross stitches down on row 1. You should have 1 loop left on your hook, which is the first stitch of row 3. The back of your work is kind of thick with the Tunisian stitch. So now to work row 3 is the same as row 4. When you're working across, the only thing you have to worry about is when you first start, sometimes this first stitch that you skip likes to go over here, so you really have to look for it. But if you keep your tension, you know, nice and even and a little loose, you should be okay. So you're going to skip the first vertical stitch, insert your hook into that next vertical stitch, yarn over the hook, pull it through the stitch. Come back to the right, insert your hook underneath that one vertical strand, yarn over the hook, and pull it through that stitch. And then you're creating one crossed Tunisian stitch right on top of the other. And you're going to continue working row 2 for however many rows you would like. So skip the next vertical stitch, insert it under the next vertical stitch, yarn over the hook, pull it through, come back to the right, insert it under the next vertical stitch, yarn over the hook, and pull it through. And you can see how your stitches are right on top of each other. Skip the next vertical stitch, insert your hook under the next vertical stitch, yarn over the hook, pull it through the stitch, come back to the right, insert your hook under that vertical stitch, yarn over the hook, and pull it through the stitch. So we'll finish row 3, so continue across, and you'll end up with one single stitch in the end, and you're only going to go through that one stitch. So go ahead and finish the first half of row 3, and I'll meet you at the first half of row 3. I'm almost at the end of the first half of row 3. I'm over to the end of the row. I'm going to insert my hook into just that one top single vertical strand, yarn over the hook, and pull it through. Now you're going to take your loops off in the same manner, yarn over the hook, pull it through that first stitch, yarn over the hook, pull it through 2 loops on your hook, oops, yarn over the hook, pull it through 2 loops, yarn over, pull it through 2 loops, continue taking your loops off until you have 1 loop on your hook, which counts as the first stitch of the next row. And I'll meet you at the end of row 3. Okay, I'm at the end of row 3. Now this is a little, it does curl a little when you're working with it, but this is what your work looks like. Now if you're using a smaller size hook, you won't see all these holes, it'll be tighter. But I do have people ask me how to change colors, so before I end this video, I'm going to show you what you do before the end of the row to change your color. So when you want to change your color, okay, if you're going to change your color at the end of the row, what you're going to do is work over until you have 2 loops on your hook. You're going to grab your new color, and you're going to pull, whoops, I just put my yarn to the back as like so, yarn over the hook, and pull it through those last 2 loops. And then this creates the first stitch of the next row. And then you work in the same manner. You would skip this first vertical stitch, insert it into the next stitch, come back to the right, insert it into that skip stitch, yarn over the hook, and there you have your stitches. But what happens is when you work this stitch, you never see your X until the row previous. So when you do your next color, it will turn the yellow into the X with the next row. And then you would cut your ends to the back and weave them in. So that's how simple a color change is when you're working this stitch. I went ahead and worked my yellow across, so now I'm going to take my yellow off, and then I'm going to show you how to end your last row by binding off your loops. So go ahead and yarn over the hook, pull it through 1 stitch, yarn over the hook, pull it through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over the hook, pull it through 2 stitches. Repeat that across until you have 1 loop remaining for the next row, and then we'll learn how to bind off your last row. I'm at the end of row 4, and this is what your work should look like. All rows will be crossed except your last row will still be straight up and down. And that's the way when you're working this pattern, the last row worked will not be crossed until you work the next row. So to bind your work off, get these ends out of the way. This is the first loop, the last loop, which is the first loop of your next row. So you're going to work it the same, almost the same way. You're going to skip this first vertical stitch. You're going to insert your hook into the next stitch. You put the yarn over the hook, and you're going to pull it through both loops on the hook. You're going to come back to the skipped vertical stitch, insert your hook under that stitch, yarn over the hook, and pull it through both loops on the hook. And it's ending, you can see how it's forming the top of the stitches, and it's forming the cross right here. So you're going to skip this next vertical stitch, and if you're looking across, you can see how they run in twos. 2, 2, 2. So always skip that first of the next two, insert your hook under the next stitch, yarn over your hook, and pull it through both loops on your hook. You're going to come back to the skip stitch, yarn under that stitch, yarn over the hook, and you're going to pull it through both loops on your hook. And there again, you can see that it forms the X's now, the crosses. Skip the next vertical stitch, insert into the next stitch, yarn over, pull it through that stitch, and pull it through the loop on your hook. Come back to the skip stitch, insert your hook under that stitch, yarn over the hook, and pull it through 2 loops on the hook. So go ahead and work that across, and I'll meet you at the end of the row. I am at the end of row 4, and I have 1 stitch to go. That's our end stitch. So you're just going to stick your hook into that last stitch, yarn over, pull it through both loops on your hook. You just snip your yarn, and you fasten off your work. And this is what your piece should look like. Remember, when changing colors, you change it at the end of the row. Unless you're forming some type of pattern inside, you can change it wherever you'd like. The back of your work will look like this. And this is the front of your work. It's a very simple stitch. It's easy to do if you just, I guess it's called a TV stitch. Now you do have to watch when you're coming back to the right to pick up your stitch. But it's a very easy 1-row repeat. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Stitch of the Week with the Tunisian cross stitch. And please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.